if they know that you have a commitment to being the evidence of love, and they think that that means that you should stand there in the face of their ongoing attack that has as its purpose to make you uncomfortable so that they can watch you squirm. They must learn something about what it means for you to wish to be only the evidence of love. Because wishing to be the evidence of love and being the evidence of love will never involve your saying okay to that kind of behavior. If you say okay to that kind of behavior, you're presenting no call for correction on their part. And so, the first part of your expressing love and being the evidence of love is to say no to the behavior, absolutely. And that until the behavior changes, there can be no active relationship. Then they will be faced with the fact that they must recognize that they must change their behavior. Just as when you're reaching out to God in anger and frustration, whether it's at God or whether it's at a brother or sister, you will have to arrive at a point where, after having received no answer, that you decide to settle down your willfulness and your projection of hate so that there's enough peace and quiet within you to hear God's answer, where there's enough absence of willfulness that the will of God can register with you. And every single one of you has to come to this point. Every one of you has to come to the point of yielding to God. And that always involves yielding up your so-called right to an independent expression of willfulness. Now, if that's the only way you can approach God, that's the only way your brother or sister can approach God that is finding expression through you. Well, that feels really hard-nosed. Oh, this is the tough love. Love, I see. I understand. No, it's not tough love. It's just simple intelligence. And it is a matter of coming to a realization within yourself that there really is a way that things work. No little private separate egos are making up rules of any sort, even though that's what egos busy themselves with. There is a divine order to things. I'm sorry, mind is a singularity. And you know what that means? It means that no matter how hard you try to be fragmented, you can't succeed. Because that's the way it works. And so if you want to experience connection with God, with the Holy Spirit, with your guide, with the place of excellence in you, so that you're feeling it and experiencing it and inspired by it and enlarged in your awareness of what you are by it, you must abandon your insistence upon being some sort of really unique and interesting, complex, fragmented presence. Is that clear? Does that make sense? Why? Because that's the way it works. You must cooperate with the way things are. And there is a larger context than the infrastructure of private, defensive thoughts and concepts that you have all developed. And that larger context is your home. Now, let's continue. The next section is called the defense of conflict. We once said that without projection, there can be no anger. But it is also true that without projection, there can be no love. Listen to this. Projection is a fundamental law of the mind, and therefore one which always operates. How many of you thought the word projection was a dirty word? But it is a fundamental law of the mind, and therefore one which always operates. It is the law by which you create and were created. It is the law, projection is the law, which unifies the kingdom and keeps it in the mind of God. To the ego, the law of projection is perceived as a way of getting rid of something it does not want. So it projects it out there, as though it's not its own. It gets rid of it. But, I'm adding the word but, to the Holy Spirit, it, projection, is the fundamental law of sharing, by which you give what you value in order to keep it in your own mind. Projection to the Holy Spirit is the law of extension. To the ego, it is the law of deprivation. It, the law of projection, therefore produces abundance or scarcity, depending on how you choose to apply it. This choice is up to you. But it is not up to you to decide whether or not you will utilize projection. Every mind must project, because that is how it lives, and every mind is life. The ego's use of projection must be fully understood before its inevitable association between projection and anger can be finally undone. Now listen to this. The ego always tries to preserve conflict. It is very ingenious in devising ways which seem to diminish conflict, because it does not want you to find conflict so intolerable that you will insist on giving it up. Therefore, the ego tries to persuade you that it can free you of conflict, lest you give the ego up and free yourself. How many times during the week might you find yourself in a position or a situation that calls for correction, and you say, I know what to do about this. My experience tells me that if I do this and that and the other thing, I will be able to move things in a new direction. Somebody says, did you check in with your guide? Oh, I can handle this one. That'll take too long. I can handle this one. The ego says, I can handle this one. I can free you of conflict, lest you give me up and free yourself. You get it? The ego tries to persuade you that it can free you of conflict, lest you give the ego up and free yourself. The ego, using its own warped version of the laws of God. You see, there's the singularity again. There are no other laws to use. There's no other reality to be in. You're in the kingdom of heaven, which is governed by the laws of God, and you're either experiencing it truly or you're experiencing it through the lens of the definitions you have made up about it. But because mind is singular, you will be using the laws the only laws there are to accomplish or to seem to accomplish what you're doing. And because the laws of being serve to support being in its infinite singularity without conflict in it, every attempt you make to do something unintelligent will have an unintelligent result. Every impossible thing you attempt to do will never be done. And so when you're trying to operate on your own, every experience will be a failure of one sort or another. Why? Because mind is a singularity, and therefore the intent set into motion by virtue of sharing or extension is going to bear identical fruit. The fruit will reflect perfectly the intent, because mind is a singularity, and the intent to do something impossible will bear the fruit of failure. And the intent to be what you are not will be uncomfortable. To do what is not natural and which is therefore impossible will provide you with an experience that identifies its unnaturalness and its impossibility. And you call that suffering. And you call it the human condition, and your ego says it can free you of this. When what needs to happen is you need to abandon the ego's vantage point. You need to abandon attempting to do the impossible. You need to stop using the laws of God to demonstrate that you can't succeed at using them improperly. Again, the ego, using its own warped version of the laws of God, utilizes the power of the mind only to defeat the mind's real purpose. It projects conflict from your mind to other minds. They did it. It's their fault. I wouldn't be having so much trouble if they weren't doing blah, 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 blah. It projects conflict from your mind to other minds in an attempt to persuade you that you have gotten rid of it. See, it's their fault, not my problem. I didn't cause it. They're the cause of it. But remember, we talked last week about the fact that, yes, you did cause it. You caused it by, first of all, saying, Father, I'd rather see it my way. You didn't value the Father's way of experiencing the kingdom of heaven as the kingdom of heaven. You said, I'd rather experience it as something else. But then you don't want to take responsibility for the way you're experiencing the kingdom of heaven. So you do the only thing that you can do, because being is a matter of projecting. You project the cause of your suffering out there. Why? So that you can be squeaky clean. You innocent little bastard, you. And the word bastard is not a dirty word, it's truth, because you have gotten a bill of divorcement, haven't you? Parentless, fatherless, motherless. See, you thought it was so great to be asserting some self-authority, and you turned yourself into a bastard. You didn't expect it, and you don't want to acknowledge it either. So now everyone else is the bastard. And now it's a dirty word. They are a bastard. This has several fallacies which may not be so apparent. Strictly speaking, conflict cannot be projected precisely because it cannot be fully shared. The intent is to do something impossible. And so you can't succeed. Why? Because using the laws of God, which are singular, in an infinite environment which is singular, the attempt to do the impossible is impossible. Now there's just pure and simple logic. Any attempt to keep part of it and get rid of another part does not really mean anything. Why? Because you can't fragment or divide a singularity that is absolute and unchangeable. You just can't. You might fool yourself into believing that you have, and that's called the human condition, but you can't do it. Continuing, remember that a conflicted teacher is a poor teacher and a poor learner. His lessons are confused, and their transfer value is severely limited by his confusion. A second fallacy is the idea that you can get rid of something you do not want by giving it away. Now, I'm going to add these words. Because the laws of God are singular, and because being is singular, and because mind is singular, giving it, now I'm reading, giving it is how you keep it. That's just the way it works. So, in your ignorance, thinking you are a private, separate little mind, with rights of your own and authority of your own, you think that if you have something that you don't want and you give it away, you will no longer have it. And you're dead wrong. Because the moment you give something away, you have it. That's the law of singularity. Continuing, the belief that by giving it out, you have excluded it from within is a complete distortion of the power of extension. That is why those who project from the ego, and you all know who they are, right? You. That is why those who project from the ego are vigilant for their own safety. They are afraid that their projections will return and hurt them. They do believe they have blotted their projections from their own minds, but they also believe their projections are trying to creep back into them. That is because the projections have not left their minds, and this in turn forces them to engage in compulsive activity in order not to recognize this. Is that insanity or what? You cannot perpetuate an illusion about another without perpetuating it about yourself. There is no way out of this. Why? Because it is impossible to fragment your mind. Why is it impossible to fragment your mind? Because mind is a singularity. Always has been, always will be, is now, because there's no other condition of the existence of mind available. Now, I've got to return to this sticky little subject about other people's behavior and how you respond. Because this sentence can be used as a basis for your staying in a situation of continuing to be abused. Here it is. You cannot perpetuate an illusion about another without perpetuating it about yourself. And the ego wants to come in and say, well, if I'm saying that their behavior is unacceptable and they cannot behave that way in my presence, am I not creating a picture that is untrue about them and projecting it on them and thereby making it true about me? And is not the whole process one that continues the illusion, the problem, rather than healing it? Is anybody not understanding me? Well, if you are, just rewind the tape and listen to what I just said over again. I'm not going to repeat it right now. When you say to another, we cannot continue this involvement until you're willing to modify your behavior, until you're willing to exercise a little self-control and stop behaving in such an obtuse way. If you are going to say that to someone, it is not to say they are bad. It is not to say they are wrong. It is not a judgment. It is an observation of behavior that they are engaging in consciously, on purpose. And you are saying, I will not join with you in agreeing with you that this behavior represents what is true about you. And so I will not let this false presentation continue in my presence. I will not honor its expression in my presence because I know the truth about you. And until you're willing to express a little bit more of it with me, sayonara. I honor the integrity of your being too much to allow you to cover it up with this behavior and expect me to accept it. That is love, because it doesn't honor something in them that they want you to honor. And they want you to honor their right to be themselves in any fashion that they choose, whether it's loving or loveless. And you must say no. And when you say no, it doesn't mean they're a bad person. It doesn't mean that you have a negative concept about them. It says that you respect what's true about them too much to allow them to present themselves this way and expect you to believe that that's them and accept that it is them. You won't do it. You cannot, I'm repeating, you cannot perpetuate an illusion about another without perpetuating it about yourself. And if you stand without objection in the presence of another who is being insane and wanting you to accept their insanity as the truth about them, you must say no. Because if you do agree with them, and you agree with their right to behave in a way that doesn't reflect what's real about them, you are then agreeing that an illusion is real, and you are confirming it in them, and you are thereby, because mind is singular, confirming it about yourself. Does that make sense? Do you see that? Good. If nothing else has been made clear today, that is a major step forward. And we are going to end there. I know that the idea of singularity has been difficult to grasp the meaning of. And I know that I have been very repetitive. But it's because it's so essential to understand. And it's because it is such a simplicity that if you don't get it in its simplicity, whatever we read from now on is going to seem complex. And you will think that waking up is a complex thing when it's not. Can't we get on to something fresh and new and stimulating? Don't worry, we will. We will. I love you all, and I look forward to being with you next week. Thank you.